I'm going to mute myself. Um, has there ever been an analysis, or is it too much in its infancy? What is the cost savings? I'm assuming that the cost of restorative justice is probably much less than going through a formal trial. Has there been any documentation on cost?
I would say the most comprehensive report that I'm aware of is the Young Adult Diversion Project. Again, this comes out of the United States. It was a several years long project, longitudinal study tracking the outcomes for young adults. So these are people over the age of 18 who are legally charged as adults, but they're still under the age of 25. And there's this growing body of literature that shows that people in this stage of adolescence are still developing their frontal cortex, that are still not fully cognizant of the consequences of their actions. So that's why the report studied this particular age group. And across the board, they showed less recidivism, less reoffending, less engagement with the criminal justice system, higher rates of employment, higher rates of entry to secondary education programs, and high rates of completion of those programs. So I think the social costs really speak for themselves when we see, fewer people in jail, more people with productive jobs, more people, getting university degrees and becoming productive in that way, instead of getting into that cycle of reoffending that we often see when incarceration is the first answer.
I have a question.
Just 1 second. That's okay.
Yes,
You want to go
thank
ahead?
you. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Ben, for this lovely presentation. I was just going to ask the same question about the cost of this program when you have to, to use it, whether it is cost worthy. But which you've answered. But I also had a second question about the rate of success so far. But I guess that in your answer, you kind of answered my question as well. And yeah, do we have like specific numbers to represent the success rate of this this method where it is being applied so far in Canada?
I'd say success rate is up around 90% in terms of people having this as their last interaction with the justice system. So I'd say we have like less than a 10% rate of people who are completing these programs and then committing other offenses. And even on that, I would want to talk a little bit about restorative and healing as not a purely linear trajectory. Frequently, we have people who have relapses. They're getting better, but they're not all the way there yet. And really, it has to do with being able to catch this early on. Like in terms of dollars amount, it costs over $1,500 a day to keep somebody in jail. Whereas the cost of completing one of these programs would be, under $2,000 per participant. Oh, by way of example, I was representing somebody who had a fairly lengthy criminal record and was working on turning things around and was completing a 6-month conditional sentence. So not jail, but conditional sentence in the community, kind of like house arrest, but with supports of probation and mental health supports. And following that sentence, was involved in another incident. But there had been several years between her last incident and what I might call a relapse. So again, working towards improvement, not 100%, still making mistakes. Though that last incident was now 3 years ago, and there's been no further involvement with the law. So again, I think over time we are seeing a trend even in that one individual towards improvement. So even when there is sometimes relapse or a recurrence, that doesn't mean that the approach has failed. It just means that there's more healing to be done. Okay, now next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious how restorative justice deals with true inequalities. What I mean by that is the differences between rich people and poor people, or ethnic or racial biases. Or even if you think about it, given it involves communication and building trust, differences in personality styles in terms of people who are really introverted versus really extroverted. I mean, I suppose it goes to the how do you prepare the people for the process, but I could see where some of those things might play out more so in restorative justice than they would in the traditional system where there's someone advocating on someone's behalf.
I mean, with many things, it's very situational and case specific. But I would say with restorative justice, one of the reasons I'm so drawn to restorative justice myself is for its potential to ameliorate those who are living in these marginalized community. I see the traditional adversarial trial system frequently leading to higher rates of incarceration, and people get into cycles of crime. We see a lot of culturally based crime. People are engaging in this behavior and they continue to engage in the behavior. The response is to put them in jail. The response to people being put in jail is higher rates of crime. It's very demonstrable. There's statistics on this that the longer people spend in jail, the more likely they are to reoffend. So longer sentences beget more criminality. So this restorative justice is a chance to break people out of that cycle. It really has to do with education and compassion, understanding some of where people are at. A lot of these crimes, like I'm a duty counsel lawyer, a lot of the crimes I see are poverty motivated. I call myself sort of on the front lines, and I see a lot of homeless people who are in there for shoplifting charges, for mischief charges, for poverty motivated charges. They're not being given the chances and the opportunities. And a lot of times these opportunities don't even exist. We don't have enough mental health institutions that are capable of treating a lot of the people who I see are engaged with the criminal justice system because of their own mental health. They don't have the resources to adequately provide for their needs in ways that don't break the law. And because, they don't have the mental resources, they don't have the economic resources, and they take basically a path of least resistance, which for them involves shoplifting and mischief and minor assaults. And they find themselves back in jail and reincarcerated, and with a system that continues to fail them by not providing them those opportunities, by not giving them those skills or those chances. And they're back out on the street in a matter of weeks or months because the sentence for the crime it's considered proportional to be a few months in jail for this. And then they're back on the streets. They still haven't received any of the actual help they need. And they have no other means of operating. It's the only life they know, and they're back there again. So I like working primarily with youth, before that cycle begins, or just as it is starting to go down a very bad road, and get those youth involved in restorative systems where they have a chance to improve and to hopefully become more productive and less engaged in the criminal system. So
And if I can just interrupt, I mean, the question focuses on how do you prepare those marginalized individuals who often don't have the capacity to communicate effectively. And so you got to have an incredible facilitator who understands what trauma bonds are, so to speak.
Yes,
in order
trauma.
to give
trauma-informed lawyering.
You've got to have a trauma-informed lawyer
and
or
meetings
whatever.
with counselors. Yeah. So to answer the question about preparation, several weeks, sometimes months, 2 or 3 months can go into meeting the offenders, having them go through counseling, participating in that. Taking accountability is very key. And, making sure that they're prepared before they meet with the survivors. So yeah, counseling sessions happen, one-on-one sessions, and sometimes there's brainstormings or like an apology letter is sometimes written, and that process of writing the apology letter and working through that with the facilitator helps to prepare the offender for the next phase or the healing circle part of the process, where they will meet with the survivors and other community members to craft that solution going forward. And then it takes a lot of community work and involvement to make sure that those solutions get implemented and, stay on target. So I'd say basically how we prepare is by setting up meetings in advance, by explaining the process of restorative justice, by ensuring that the offender is taking accountability, and to make sure that they are fully prepared to engage with the process before we start bringing in the other community members.
Thank you.
Anybody else questions?
It sounds to me that it's more of a support system that's required rather than a legal system. I mean, the solicitors can recommend these things, but unless the community is behind it and marshals their resources to take over the operations, basically, it would seem to me that it would work fine in a small, very close-knit community, but in a larger urban area and situation, what have you, it would seem to be quite a difficult situation to get involved with.
It does involve a lot of social work. I frequently say that my job involves a lot more social work than traditional lawyering.
Exactly.
And we do have a lot of these organizations like Peace Builders operating out of Toronto. There's the community justice centers, and it involves a lot of liaising. So you have lawyers representing clients, making referrals to these agencies and negotiating with the Crown for these kinds of solutions. And then, I frequently am in contact with probation officers and talking to them about getting in touch with victims. I do a lot of proactive work in reaching out to victim input services, because I find a lot of times that it takes proactively reaching out to those organizations to get the ball rolling. And yeah, it really changes the kind of work that's being done. I see it as a more holistic approach that encompasses different aspects of the individual. And one of my monikers is consider myself a crime fighting advocate. And the way in which I prevent crime is by working with offenders to minimize reoffending.